Good evening, Americans, and welcome to the Ed Show from New York. John Boehner wants cost-cutting details from the president. Tonight, details on the speaker's shell game. This is the Ed Show. Let's get to work.
The White House has to get serious. This is not a game. I'm disappointed in what's happened.
The Speaker of the House is disappointed. He's also deceptive and dishonest.
Democrats have yet to get serious about real spending cuts.
Tonight, Richard Wolff on today's nonsense from Republicans and where a deal on the fiscal cliff stands. And former health insurance executive Wendell Potter on what Obama's proposed $340 billion in Medicare cuts will mean for seniors. Vice President Joe Biden stumps for the middle class at a retail store that treats its workers right. I'll talk Costco and Fiscal Cliff with Steve Greenhouse of the New York Times. Plus, Hostess executives tank their company and cost the people their jobs. So why are they still demanding millions of dollars in bonuses? And we'll tell you how Senator John McCain fits in with Congressman Louis Gohmert's latest conspiracy theory.
This administration sent planes and bombs in support to oust Gaddafi so that Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood could take over Libya.
Good to have you with us tonight, folks. Thanks for watching. Republicans are walking tall in public, but hanging their heads behind closed doors. House Speaker John Boehner struck a defiant tone during a news conference today. He blamed the president and Democrats for stalling negotiations on a debt deal.
Despite the claims that the president supports a balanced approach, the Democrats have yet to get serious about real spending cuts. And secondly, no substantive progress has been made in the talks between the White House and the House over the last 2 weeks.
Tough talk. It's also completely divorced from reality. Right before the news conference, Boehner met with Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner, who offered Republicans a detailed plan to avoid the fiscal cliff. It included $1.6 trillion in new revenue from tax hikes on the rich. The White House is giving $400 billion in savings from Medicare and entitlements. There's also a request for at least $50 billion in infrastructure spending, mortgage relief, and other stimulus measures. None of this is a surprise to the Republicans. This is what President Obama campaigned on. It's also what Republicans have been presented behind closed doors for weeks. Politico reported on the deal taking shape behind the scenes. It includes most of the same details the White House has in its proposal. According to Politico, House Republican leaders recognize President Obama holds the high cards, and the public is likely to blame Republicans if negotiations blow up and the new year begins with a fiscal disaster. The facts didn't stop Speaker Boehner from claiming the White House is holding up negotiations.
Majority Leader and I just had a meeting with the Treasury Secretary. It was frank and it was direct. I was hopeful we'd see a specific plan for cutting spending.
The Treasury Secretary's proposal seems pretty specific. It even includes $400 billion in specific cuts. But John Boehner sees something different.
We know what the menu is. What we don't know is what the White House is willing to do to get serious about solving our debt crisis.
So what is this all about? I mean, I guess John Boehner has his own definition of specifics. According to the John Boehner Dictionary, specifics means having all the attributes John Boehner agrees with and nothing he doesn't like. Keep in mind, this is the same Boehner who said $38 billion in cuts was the largest real dollar spending cut in American history. When Boehner got those cuts last year, he called himself a pretty happy man. What a difference an election makes. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid doesn't understand what Boehner is thinking.
I don't understand his brain, so you should ask him, okay?
White House Press Secretary Jay Carney explained the real reason a deal hasn't been reached yet.
We're not there yet because the remaining obstacle here is, on the revenue side, is that Republicans, at least Republican leaders, have yet to accept the essential fact that in order to achieve the kinds of revenue that are necessary for a balanced proposal, balanced plan, rates on the top 2%, the wealthiest earners in this country, are going up.
Republicans are buckling, and the Democrats know it. Here's New York Senator Chuck Schumer saying what Republicans don't want to hear.
We don't expect the Republicans to be enthusiastic and start cheerleading about a deal that includes higher rates on the wealthiest Americans. They're not going to openly concede on this point this far out from the deadline, but they see the handwriting on the wall.
And the handwriting on the wall is spelling out 3 words. Congressman Tom Cole, the conservative from Oklahoma, was the first Republican to admit the GOP should pass the Democrats' bill to extend the tax cuts on income under $250,000. Other Republicans are joining Cole's ranks.
If you're going to sign me up with a camp, I like what Tom Cole has to say. I know you had him on the show earlier at length, and I think Tom presented a very thoughtful, articulate position.
Republican Senator John Thune of South Dakota dropped the bomb on Fox News.
Are Republicans willing to hold the line, to say to the president, I am sorry, we will never agree to a deal that involves an increase in taxes? Are they?
I think any deal that passes up here that raises taxes, and raises taxes, as I mentioned earlier, on small businesses, Martha, is not going to enjoy Republican support. Now, there may be enough Republicans who would vote for something like that to pass it in the House of Representatives.
Well, if there are enough Republican votes to pass the bill, the game's over, isn't it? Republicans are facing the inevitable, it seems like. Nebraska Congressman Lee Terry told the Omaha newspaper, we're screwed either way. We really have no leverage in these discussions. We also learned today GOP leaders were actually polling their members in the House to see exactly what sort of tax hikes that they would go along with, that they would support. This isn't a whole lot of wiggle room for the Republicans at this point, and it certainly isn't any game plan for them if they're out polling their own members this late in the game. This is why John Boehner went out and lied to the American people in the press today. He doesn't know what the heck's going on. He doesn't know where his caucus is. He knows the White House put out hard numbers on the table, and all he can do is pretend that they don't exist. Republicans can talk a big game in front of the cameras, but behind closed doors and at the negotiating table, they're just not very strong. Boehner is one of these guys who likes to play golf at the country club. And then after they play golf at the country club, you go have a couple of drinks and you sit down and play poker. And I want to give the speaker credit today. He had a pretty good poker face on today. For a moment, he was kind of convincing. But we all know the truth. The Obama team has put the budget in front of him. He knows what the cuts are. And for him to go out in front of the American public and be disingenuous about he doesn't know what the specifics are is a flat-out lie. Get your cell phones out. I want to know what you think. Tonight's question, who is John Boehner fooling? Text A for no one. Text B for himself to 622-639. You can always go to our blog at ed.msnbc.com. We'll bring you the results later on in the show. Joining me now is Richard Wolff, who is not a card player. He is the MSNBC political analyst and vice president and executive editor of MSNBC.com. I thought it was an Academy Award performance by Boehner today. He knows what the numbers are, don't you think? Why is he doing this?
He knows what the numbers are, and he knows what the other side is holding here. Look, he's got to pretend like he fought for something, but he does have no leverage. Tom Cole, by the way, isn't just a guy from Oklahoma. He led the Republican conference. That's the ideological core. Those are the sort of torch holders for the whole movement. And so when Tom Cole says, we got to go with what we got here, we got to take what we got, we're going to declare victory and move on, that's how it's going to play out. And Tom Cole didn't say that once. I know it kind of got leaked, but he said it over and over and over again. And here's the deal. They're not going to vote for a tax rise. That's not the vote that's going to be in front of them. The vote in front of them is going to be to cut taxes. Taxes will rise anyway because the Bush tax cuts will expire. Then they'll bring in legislation saying, let's cut taxes for the middle class. And every Republican out there, including John Boehner, will say, I voted for a tax cut, not a tax hike.
Well, here's Tom Cole speaking with Chuck Todd about Cole's advice to pass the tax extensions for 98% of Americans. Here it is, rather comical.
Well, that advice was given in private, but you guys have a way of figuring out what to said in private, and somebody leaked it out. That's fine, because I'm not going to tell you one thing.
You didn't intend for this to go public. You did not.
No,
this was something didn't. You were okay.
Yeah, but again, it is what I said. It's not an inaccurate report.
I mean, did Republican leaders want Cole's advice to be leaked?
Of course they did. I mean, and if they didn't want it to be leaked, they wanted it to be repeated. So John Boehner has some wiggle room. He can look like he's the tough guy to all the Tea Party folks who've got to vote him back in as Speaker. But Tom Cole is really laying out the policy. If they wanted to shut him up, he would have been shut up. And so where does this leave them? They're not going to play the card on the debt ceiling because that was a disaster for them. They're going to say, you know what, we tried to say that Democrats were not serious about spending cuts, but they have no option. They lost the election. You know, Republican voters were lied to about the state of the polls. They were lied to about the state of America. And if they want to believe that this is the only path, that only spending cuts will get them to deficit reduction, they can carry on believing that, or they can get to a place where they're going to get reelected.
Richard, I think the president is offering a great deal to the Republicans. Here's why. These guys can go home 98% and say, you know what, 98% of you got the tax cuts. I didn't raise your taxes. And by the way, my base, you wealthy folks over here, look what Obama did to you. He raised your taxes. That's only going to infuriate the wealthy even more. The fact here is that he has given them something they can campaign on. Plus, they can turn around and say, you know, these are his cuts to Medicare, not ours.
Right.
And I don't know why they don't take this deal for the good of the country and come back and fight another day.
That's the biggest lie of all, by the way. To say that Democrats are not serious about entitlements, $400 billion of cuts to Medicare is a cut to entitlements. That's going to mean hardship for seniors. That's a real cut. Now, you can pretend like the hospitals are going to swallow all of that cost cut. They're not. They're going to pass that on. That means less health care. Those are real dollars. And so you can say that Democrats are not serious, but $400 billion to most people, that's real money.
Well, the Obama team is saying that they can find these costs in inefficiencies and the providers, and that's where they're going to go. They keep pushing the idea that there's no question that it's not going to hurt the benefits. So this is the devil in the detail.
Okay.
But the point being here is that he's got $340 billion on the table, maybe to $400 billion on the table in the cuts, and Boehner goes out in front of the American people and denies that there's any specifics on the table.
Right. Remember, most of the Bush cuts survive this kind of deal. And, you know, when you look at the overall package, there's going to be talk about, let's have tax reform, let's go after entitlements. This is a real deal for Republicans. They're not going to turn it down because there's nowhere else to go. Otherwise, all the tax cuts go.
You mean they're just going to wait till December 23rd? And we're just going to have this drama all the way until
they
it's time
go
to go home to eat turkey for the holidays again?
Go
I
home.
got it. Richard Wolff, good to have you with us tonight, always.
Thanks, Ed.